Konohanasakuya-hime is born in the hush of dawn, where the first blush of light touches the trembling blossoms that cling to the mountainsides. Her name drifts like a petal on cool air, carrying with it the promise of beauty that flares and fades, yet leaves the heart trembling with longing. She stands as the goddess of blossoms, the sovereign of delicate ephemerality, and the quiet keeper of desire that unfurls despite the knowledge that nothing, not even the sweetest moment, can linger forever. Her myth begins where silence meets breath, and where the world learns to ache for what is fleeting. The land she inhabits is shaped by contrast, a realm where tenderness and fire coexist. High above the fields and villages, the mountains breathe with volcanic heat, releasing murmurs of smoke that intertwine with drifting mists. Beneath those veils of white and silver, Sakura trees stretch their fragile branches toward the sky, releasing cascades of petals that look like whispered confessions falling from trembling lips. In this realm, every sight seems to hover between creation and disappearance, teaching that beauty is always on the edge of vanishing. Konohanasakuya-hime is the embodiment of this world's shimmering uncertainty. Her skin glows with the softness of dawn, her hair flows like ribbons of dark water, and her presence carries the scent of blossoms just opened, delicate and intoxicating. She is adored not simply for her loveliness, but for the emotion her existence stirs, the longing to hold what cannot be held, to pause the moment before it slips away. Her divinity is a reminder that all living hearts are drawn to transience, even when it aches. Her story begins with a quiet exhale of the earth itself. Ancient tales say she rose from a single blossom born in the shadow of Mount Fuji, carried upward by warm currents until she took the form of a maiden. That blossom was said to have been unlike any other, its petals glowing faintly, as if lit from within by the breath of the volcano below. From that fragile bloom, the goddess emerged, gentle but powerful, soft yet forged in fire. Her dual origin reflects the tension at the heart of her myth, beauty formed in a place of unpredictability. The mountain mists welcomed her like a daughter, swirling around her ankles as she took her first steps. The earth rumbled beneath her feet, not in anger, but in reverence, acknowledging her as a spirit born of both tenderness and volcanic fury. Wherever she walked, blossoms sprang forth in her wake, blooming for only a moment, then drifting away on the wind. Yet even as they vanished, each petal carried a lingering warmth, an imprint of her presence that touched every living thing it brushed. To speak of Konohanasakuya-hime is to speak of impermanence itself. She teaches that the most moving experiences in life are those that cannot last, for their fragility heightens their sweetness. People prayed to her not only for abundance or fertility, but for moments of emotion so vivid they might glow in memory long after they faded from the world. Her temples became sanctuaries of soft whispers, where lovers asked for the courage to open their hearts even knowing they could break, and where wanderers sought guidance on how to cherish the fleeting beauty of the journey. Her myth carries a sensual undercurrent, not of physical desire alone, but of emotional awakening, the stirring of a yearning so profound it feels like warmth blooming under the skin. Her presence evokes the sensation of fingers grazing petals, of breath brushing against the curve of one's neck, of a heartbeat quickening beneath delicate layers of feeling. She embodies the moment when the world seems to hold still, poised on the edge of something tender and transformative.
The people of ancient Japan believed that when Sakura petals fell in sudden flurries, it was the goddess passing by, her emotions rippling through the air. A gentle scattering meant she walked in tranquility, her touch blessing the land. A sudden storm of blossoms meant she felt the intensity of longing or sorrow, releasing her feelings into the world in shimmering waves. Those who stood beneath such cascades often felt overcome with emotion, as though their own hearts had been laid bare. Konohanasakuya-hime's myth is not one of distant divinity. She is near, intimate, her presence brushing close to the human heart. She watches over those who dare to feel deeply, guiding them to embrace vulnerability instead of fleeing from it. Her lessons are sensual because they awaken awareness of touch, of breath, of connection, and of the fleeting nature of every cherished moment. Through her, the world learns that desire is not shameful, but a sign of life blooming within the soul. Her realm is a canvas painted with contrasts. The cool mist that settles on the skin, the warm breath of the earth rising from volcanic fissures, the trembling of petals as they fall, the quiet stillness of untouched snow on high peaks. Every detail reflects the delicate tension between presence and disappearance. It is in this balance that her essence resides, a reminder that beauty is amplified by its fragility, and emotion deepens when it is vulnerable to loss.
When storytellers speak of her, they describe not only her grace, but the atmosphere she carries with her. A softness that wraps itself around the listener and invites them to lean closer. Her myth pulls the heart forward, urging it to seek meaning in sensations easily overlooked. The brush of wind against the cheek, the warmth of sunlight on the eyelids, the trembling anticipation before a confession is spoken. In her presence, even silence becomes charged with possibility. Konohanasakuya-hime's introduction is not merely an opening to a story. It is an invitation into a world where beauty is fragile, desire is gentle yet powerful, and emotion flows like petals carried on a shifting breeze. To follow her is to accept the truth that nothing is promised, yet everything is precious. Her myth teaches that even the shortest blossom season can leave an everlasting trace on the heart, and that longing itself can be a source of profound beauty. Thus begins her tale, woven of mist, fire, blossoms, and breath, an unfolding of tenderness poised against the inevitability of change. It is a story that does not ask to be possessed, only to be felt. And in feeling it, one steps into the quiet radiance of Konohanasakuya-hime, the goddess who blooms, fades, and reawakens desire with every passing moment. In the hush that follows her first appearance, the world itself seems to lean closer, as though eager to memorize the rhythm of her presence before it slips away again. Travelers who glimpse her figure describe a sensation like awakening from a dream just as it becomes sweetest.
an ache that lingers long after the vision dissolves. They say her eyes hold the soft shimmer of petals drifting at twilight, reminding all who meet her that every tender moment is carved from the edge of impermanence. Even the mountains seem aware of her fragility, their vast ancient bodies trembling faintly beneath her steps, as if promising to cradle her delicacy with unyielding strength. And yet, despite the vulnerability woven into her very being, she radiates a quiet confidence, a knowing that the fleeting nature of beauty does not diminish its power, but deepens it. Through her, the world learns that transience is not a wound, but a gift, urging hearts to open fully, to feel boldly, and to cherish every sensation before it passes into memory. This lingering echo is the true beginning of her myth, a blossoming awareness that what fades can also transform, and what is delicate can hold the greatest depths of longing. Her story softly breathes promise into every dawn.
Konohanasakuya-hime enters her story not with thunder, but with a breath of wind soft enough to be mistaken for a sigh. Her presence is not the kind that seeks to dominate the world. It simply exists, delicate yet undeniable, like a blossom that insists on opening even when frost lingers on the edges of early spring. She embodies the essence of transient beauty, the sort that stirs a quiet yearning precisely because it might vanish at any moment. Her face glows with the pale radiance of dawn, and her movements seem woven from threads of sunlight filtered through petals. People call her the goddess of blooming, but her true gift lies deeper, in the tender ache she awakens within those who behold her, a sensation that feels like hope wrapped in vulnerability. Her tenderness is not weakness. It is a hidden strength, a softness capable of weathering storms without losing its grace. Every gesture of hers, every breath, carries an intimacy that seems to brush against the inner walls of the heart. Those who speak her name do so with reverence, tinged with longing, for she is both a comfort and a reminder that nothing beautiful is guaranteed to last. Yet beneath this gentleness lies an unspoken resilience. She is the daughter of mountains and fire, after all. Though her petals seem fragile, they grow near the breath of volcanoes, surviving heat and ash with a quiet defiance. Her hidden strength reveals itself not through force, but through the certainty with which she embraces impermanence. She understands that beauty is not diminished by its brevity. Instead, it becomes more precious. This knowing gives her an aura of tranquil fortitude, a serenity that hints at depths of emotion she rarely reveals. When she gazes at the world, her eyes shimmer like petals caught in sunlight, reflecting both the sweetness of the present moment and the melancholy of its eventual passing. Her vulnerability is real, but it is embraced, not hidden. It is what makes her divine. Opposite her stands Ninigi no Mikoto, the young god who descends from the heavens with the weight of celestial purpose resting upon his shoulders. His arrival is marked not by softness, but by the distinct hum of authority, an undercurrent of resolve shaped by his lineage. He is the embodiment of divine duty, carrying with him the fierce glow of the sun from which his family descends. Yet beneath this radiant fire burns something quieter, a longing he cannot express, a curiosity that pulls him toward the world below the heavens. While his divine role promises structure, his heart stirs with the desire to understand something less predictable, less orderly, something fragile and real. Though trained to stride with certainty, Ninigi harbors questions about connection, about emotion, about a warmth he has only felt distantly until now. He seeks something that cannot be commanded by divine decree.
The meeting between Ninigi and Konohanasakuya-hime is not described in ancient texts as a clash of divine forces, but as a moment that feels disturbingly human in its tenderness. He encounters her beside a trail lined with blossoms, the air thick with the scent of spring. Her presence seems to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it, softening the world around her. At first, Ninigi cannot identify the sensation that grips him. It is neither awe nor simple attraction, but a quiet unraveling of the rigid expectations woven into his being. In her, he finds something he has never known in the celestial realm, a beauty that is not eternal and therefore infinitely more compelling. Her transience calls to him like a whispered challenge. Konohanasakuya-hime, for her part, senses the fire within him the moment their eyes meet. He radiates intensity, a glow that almost overwhelms her softness, yet she does not look away. Instead, she feels a gentle pull, an instinctive recognition of contrast, his blazing resolve against her delicate bloom. The sight of him stirs both curiosity and fear within her. She is accustomed to the admiration of mortals, but the presence of a god whose emotions burn hotter than the volcanic breath that shaped her petals is something else entirely. His gaze, though steady, carries a vulnerability he cannot hide fully, and it touches something tender inside her. She can feel the tension between desire and duty pulsing beneath his composed exterior. Their contrasts define the space between them. Ninigi is fire shaped into form, while Konohanasakuya-hime is blossom softened by vapor and light. He moves with the certainty of someone who believes he knows his path, yet she embodies the kind of beauty that can change the direction of a life with a single glance. He is used to permanence, to eternal radiance, but she teaches him that the glow of the moment can be more powerful than the promise of eternity. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of celestial history. When she listens, the air seems to still, as though the world itself wants to cradle her softness. Their desires begin to surface in subtle ways. Ninigi is drawn to the gentle vulnerability in her presence, to the way she stands like a living breath of spring, unafraid of her own fragility. She is the first thing he cannot command or contain, and this humbles him. Instead of seeking to possess her, he finds himself longing to understand her, to learn the quiet rhythms of her emotions. For a god accustomed to order, this longing feels both terrifying and intoxicating. He feels the need to protect her delicate form, yet he senses that she truly needs no protection. This contradiction strikes him deeply. Konohanasakuya-hime, meanwhile, feels a warmth blooming in her chest when Ninigi draws near, a warmth that mirrors the blossoms that unfurl in her wake. His fire stirs her, not as a threat, but as a force that illuminates her own hidden strength. She senses that beneath his divine duty lies a tenderness he keeps guarded, a longing for connection that mirrors her own, though she rarely admits it. The emotions rising within her are soft yet insistent, like petals pushed open by sunlight. She knows the danger of allowing herself to feel deeply. She understands that desire makes one vulnerable to loss. Yet the presence of Ninigi makes her want to take the risk. Their magnetic pull grows stronger in the silence between them. Konohanasakuya-hime's softness seems to soothe the fire within Ninigi, while his resolve gives shape to the fragility she embodies. They meet like two forces created in contrast, yet drawn by an intrinsic harmony. The air between them becomes charged with possibility, a delicate tension that feels both fragile and unbreakable. Each moment they share seems suspended, as if the world itself holds its breath, aware that this connection is the beginning of something that will ripple through time. Ninigi finds himself wanting to touch her not out of possession, but reverence. His desire carries the weight of someone who has never yearned for something fleeting before, someone who feels the world shifting beneath his feet. Konohanasakuya-hime feels her own longing unfurl like a blossom touched by warmth, gentle yet powerful. She senses the danger, the sweetness, the ache of it, but she does not turn away. Their vulnerabilities intertwine. His fear of failing divine duty, her fear of being cherished only for her beauty, his longing for a connection that transcends celestial command, her yearning to be seen for more than her blossoms, all of these threads weave together into a tension that sets the stage for the unfolding myth. They stand at the threshold of a story shaped by contrasts, divine fire and delicate bloom, resolution and vulnerability, permanence and ephemerality. And in that contrast, the seeds of desire begin to take root.
The conflict begins not with anger, but with a tremor, quiet, almost imperceptible, running beneath the sweetness that had bloomed between them. For all the warmth that Konohanasakuya-hime and Ninigi no Mikoto felt in each other's presence, a shadow lurked at the edge of their connection, woven from the very nature of what drew them together. She was ephemeral, a blossom born from mist and volcanic breath, destined to bloom brilliantly and fade swiftly. He was divine permanence, tasked with shaping the mortal world with the unwavering fire of the heavens. Their hearts knew the truth before their lips dared speak it. Something this tender could fracture under the weight of what it meant to exist. Ninigi felt it first, the tension curling tight beneath the admiration he held for her. At night, when the world was quiet and the mountains breathed slow plumes of smoke into the sky, he would watch her standing among the blossoms she loved so dearly. Their petals clung to her like affectionate spirits, brushing her cheeks as if they feared losing her to the wind. Each time he saw them dance around her, a quiet panic stirred in his chest. The Sakura bloomed for only a moment. What if she was the same? What if she slipped away before he ever truly held her heart? That thought tightened inside him like a fear he was not allowed to voice. Konohanasakuya-hime felt his worry as surely as she felt the warmth of sunlight across her skin. She sensed the heaviness in his gaze, the longing buried beneath it, the way his fingers trembled slightly when he reached for her hand. She saw in him a god struggling with the paradox she embodied. She was beauty that lived in the present, never promising tomorrow, while he carried the weight of centuries yet to come. His life stretched endlessly ahead. Hers shimmered like a sigh on the tip of morning air. Though he never spoke his fear aloud, she recognized it, and it pressed against her heart, stirring her own uncertainty. She wondered if he loved her for what she was or for what he wished she could be. Ninigi grew up in a realm when nothing withered, where celestial radiance endured unchallenged by time. Would he learn to cherish the fleeting, or would he one day resent the fragility that defined her very soul? Her petals, her smiles, her presence, all were gifts of the moment. She feared that he would demand permanence from her, a promise she could not give without betraying herself. And yet, she could not deny the desire that bloomed in her chest whenever he spoke her name, soft and reverent, as though she were something sacred. The tension between them sharpened when Ninigi, overwhelmed by the intensity of his emotions, tried to anchor her to him with the certainty he knew best. "Stay with me," he murmured one evening, the sky aflame with sunset. His words carried the weight of a vow, yet trembled with the vulnerability of a plea. "I want you by my side, not just now, but always." Always. The word fluttered inside Konohanasakuya-hime like a startled bird spreading its wings. She felt its sweetness, its sincerity, its longing, but also its impossibility. She lowered her gaze, petals drifting around her like sighs. "Ninidi," she whispered, her voice as gentle as the breeze. "I am a blossom. My nature is to open, to breathe, to shine, and one day to fall." She reached toward him, cupping his cheek with a tenderness that soothed and pained at once. "I cannot promise what the world did not give me." Her answer pierced him deeper than any blade could. A god used to certainty did not know how to love something that might disappear. Yet he also knew that he could not walk away from her. Desire tethered him to her like a thread that tightened every time he tried to loosen it. The more he feared losing her, the more intensely he longed for her. This longing became a fire inside him, one that illuminated the depths of his heart, but also scorched him when he looked at her fragility too closely. And so tension blossomed, soft, aching, irresistible. Ninigi began to question himself in ways he never had. Was it selfish to want her beyond the limits of her nature? Was it cruel to ask for her presence in his eternal life? Each time he reached for her, he felt torn between devotion and dread. His divine duty demanded stability, lineage, continuity. His heart demanded her. Yet she was a goddess who embodied impermanence itself, teaching the world that moments, not eternities, held the deepest beauty. he found himself standing on the precipice of desire and fear, unable to move in either direction without hurting. Konohanasakuya-hime, too, suffered under the growing weight of unspoken worries. She yearned for him, for his warmth, for the steady fire that contrasted her softness so perfectly. His touch made her feel cherished, seen, and treasured more deeply than she had ever known. And yet each step she took toward closeness felt like stepping deeper into a world that might someday demand more than she could give. She feared that loving him would bind her to expectations she could not fulfill, but she feared losing him even more. The mountains around them seemed to sense the strain. Winds carried whispers of uncertainty through the Sakura groves, scattering petals as though echoing the turmoil between the goddess and the god. Even the volcanic rumblings beneath the earth felt different, restless, shifting, as if mirroring the pressure building in the space between two hearts caught between desire and destiny.
A misunderstanding finally brought their quiet tension to the surface. One day, as the fog lay thick across the forest, Ninigi found Konohanasakuya-hime standing alone, her expression distant as she gently traced her fingertips along a fallen blossom. Something in her posture seemed sorrowful, resigned. He reached for her, the fear he had held back for so long overwhelming him. "Are you slipping away from me?" he asked, voice rawer than he intended. "Are you preparing to leave?" She lifted her gaze, surprised, but the hesitation in her eyes confirmed what he feared. Instead of hearing her silence as contemplation, he heard it as departure. The dread inside him ignited. "I cannot lose you," he said. "Not now." His intensity struck her like a gust of wind. She felt her heart ache at his fear, yet also felt the weight of the expectations behind it. "Ninigi," she whispered, "I am not leaving, but you must understand. I cannot become what you desire, if what you desire is permanence. I cannot promise eternity." "I'm not asking for eternity," he insisted, though his voice wavered. "I'm asking for you." "But I am the fleeting. I am the moment. I am the breath before the blossom falls." Her words wrapped around him, soft yet devastating. Desire pressed against both of them, hers to hold him, his to keep her. Yet neither desire could be fully realized without a risk that trembled at the core of their beings. Still, even in the midst of conflict, a deeper truth became clear. They were drawn to each other not despite the tension, but because of it. Her ephemeral beauty stirred a yearning in Ninigi that made him question the meaning of permanence. His steady flame awakened in her a desire to be remembered, to leave a warmth in the world that outlasted her petals. Their hearts strained against the boundaries of their natures, craving a connection that defied reason and fate. It was in this struggle, between holding on and letting go, that their bond deepened. Desire became both their sanctuary and their threat. It urged them closer, even as it exposed the tenderest parts of their souls. Their conflict was not an obstacle to their love. It was the landscape through which their love would have to grow, fragile yet persistent, like blossoms blooming on the edge of a volcano. The night of their climax began with an unusual stillness, as though the world sensed what was about to unfold. Even the wind hushed itself among the mountains, waiting. The mists clung low, illuminated faintly by the molten glow rising from the volcanic heart beneath the earth. Sakura petals drifted in slow spirals, suspended in the quiet air like soft fragments of unspoken truths. Konohanasakuya-hime stood among them, her shoulders trembling under the weight of the emotions she could no longer contain. For days she had felt the tension growing, tightening, pressing against the walls of her heart until she feared she would burst from it. She knew Ninigi felt it too. She could sense the way his fire flickered restlessly whenever he looked at her, unable to decide if he should draw her closer or let her slip away like one of the petals brushing his hands. When he approached through the mist, the air warmed as though responding to his presence. His steps were firm at first, but slowed as he neared her, every trace of divinity in him faltering beneath the gravity of what he felt. She did not turn. She didn't need to. She felt him like a tide rolling toward her. The moment he stopped behind her, close enough that she could sense the tremor in his breath, her own breath caught in her throat. Konohana. His voice was low, almost unsteady, a sound shaped by longing and fear alike. She closed her eyes. The sound of her name in his voice, soft, reverent, trembling, was enough to break the fragile balance she had tried so hard to maintain. She turned slowly, and when their eyes met, the world around them seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of them wrapped in the glow of molten earth and drifting blossoms. Ninigi took in her face as if he were seeing her for the first time, or perhaps for the last. Her lashes glimmered with unshed emotion. Her lips parted slightly, with breath caught halfway between desire and sorrow. He felt something ignite inside him, something fierce and helpless all at once. "I cannot keep pretending," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Every moment I spend with you, I fear losing you. Yet every moment apart feels like a hollow I cannot fill." Her heart tightened. She had felt the same, but hearing it spoken aloud made the ache unfurl with unbearable sweetness. She reached toward him, then hesitated, her hand hovering between them like a blossom trembling on its branch before the wind claims it.
He closed the distance, taking her hand gently, as if afraid she would vanish if he held her too tightly. The warmth of his touch spread through her like fire meeting tender petals, coaxing them open. "I love you," he breathed, the confession falling from him like molten light, heavy with truth. "I love you even if your presence is fleeting, even if you're here only for a moment. That moment is more precious to me than any eternity." The words struck her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her breath shuddered, her body softening. She had feared this, feared love, feared longing, feared the pain that came with both. But now, standing before him, his confession glowing between them like a spark, she felt her resistance melt. "Ninigi," she whispered, stepping closer until her forehead brushed softly against his chest. She felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, stronger and more vulnerable than she ever imagined. "I love you too," she said. The words came out trembling, but they carried the full weight of her spirit, fragile yet fierce. "I love you even though I know love can cut as deeply as it warms. I love you even though I may not remain in this world as long as you wish."
I love you because loving you makes my existence feel luminous. His hand rose to her cheek, tracing the curve of her skin with a tenderness that made her tremble. He murmured, "Then stay with me tonight. Not as a command, but a plea. Just tonight. No promises of eternity, only this moment." She lifted her eyes to his. The fire in them reflected the molten glow rising from below, while her gaze shimmered with the delicate brilliance of falling petals. Their differences, their fears, the fragility of their bond, all converged into the singular truth that neither could keep denying. She nodded gently, a motion so subtle it felt like the opening of a blossom in the dark. The mists drew closer around them, wrapping them in a cocoon of softness. A warm breeze swept up from the depths of the mountain, carrying with it the scent of earth, fire, and blooming branches. Ninigi stepped nearer, his breath brushing her skin like a promise carved from flame. He lowered his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling. For a moment neither moved. Their emotions surged too powerfully to shape into words. The world seemed to hold itself still, honoring the fragile gravity of the moment.
It was Konohanasakuya-hime who moved first. Her hand slid upward, resting over his heart, feeling its fervent rhythm beneath her fingertips. She let her eyes flutter closed as she leaned into him, letting the warmth of his body envelop her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him with a restraint that revealed how deeply he cherished her. His touch was not possessive, it was reverent, a silent adoration held in trembling control. The air around them shimmered. Blossoms began falling in thick, swirling flurries, as though the trees themselves were responding to their union. Petals brushed across their skin like whispers, clinging to their hair and clothing. The light from the molten core of the mountain pulsed gently through the mist, casting them in a warm glow that softened every contour of their bodies. "Ninigi," she murmured, lifting her face as his hands framed it with exquisite care. "If today is all we have, then let it be enough. Let me be yours, only for this breath, this heartbeat, this night." His response came in the form of breath mingling with hers, lips brushing softly against her forehead, then her temple, then the corner of her mouth. Each touch was a question, tender and hesitant, seeking permission. She answered by reaching up, pressing her palms gently against his cheeks, guiding his face toward hers. Their lips met in a kiss that was neither hurried nor tentative. It was the meeting of fire and blossom, of vulnerability and longing. The kiss deepened slowly, shaped by the truth they had finally allowed themselves to embrace. The warmth of his mouth blended with the sweetness of her breath, creating a sensation that made the earth beneath them hum. Her hands moved to his shoulders, feeling the strength there, while his fingers tangled gently in her hair, careful not to disturb the delicate strands. The world responded. The mists glowed faintly. The mountain rumbled softly as if sighing. Petals whirled tighter around them, creating a veil of drifting color. Heat rose from the earth in rhythmic pulses, brushing their skin like a warm tide. Everything seemed to lean closer, held in thrall by the gravity
of their union. When they finally parted, their breaths were unsteady, their foreheads pressed together, eyes closed. The emotion swirling between them felt vast, tender, and fierce. "Loving you will break me," he whispered. "Loving you will heal me." "And together?" he asked. "Together," she breathed, "we become something neither fragile nor eternal, but alive." They stood wrapped in each other's arms, the earth pulsing beneath their feet, blossoms falling like blessings from above. Their confession, their union, their release of fear, all became the moment where their souls intertwined, vulnerable and unguarded. In that fleeting, luminous breath of time, desire became devotion, fragility became strength, and the cost of loving each other became a price they were willing to pay. For that night, just that night, they belonged to no one but each other. When the night finally loosened its hold on the mountains, the first pale strands of dawn began to slip between the ridges like hesitant fingers learning the shape of the world. The air carried the faintest tremble of warmth, a reminder that even after fire, even after fear, the earth continued to breathe. Konohanasakuya-hime stood at the threshold of her fragile sanctuary, the place that had held both her vulnerability and her radiance, and allowed the new light to wash over her. She felt as if the sky were exhaling for her, releasing a tension she had carried too long, a tension born of love, uncertainty, and the fragile promise she had dared to nurture. Ninigi no Mikoto approached slowly, his steps softened by the petals that had fallen during the long night, petals untouched by flame, yet scattered as though they had witnessed everything. He stopped a short distance from her, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence. The dawn illuminated her in a way that made him understand without words how close he had come to losing something he didn't yet fully comprehend. She appeared both luminous and humanly delicate, caught between divinity and the trembling ache of love. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, though he knew she stood before him whole. What he feared had nothing to do with her physical form and everything to do with her heart, whether it had withered under doubt, whether it had withdrawn behind the barriers of her ephemeral nature. She looked at him, her gaze soft but no longer wavering. "I am unchanged," she replied, "but not unaltered." Her voice carried the gentleness of drifting petals and the quiet certainty of roots buried deep beneath the soil. "I feared that loving you would tether me too tightly to a world meant to blossom and fade, but I see now that love does not deny transience. It illuminates it." Her words struck him with the force of clarity, as if the final veil between them had dissolved. He reached for her hand, letting their fingers intertwine, and felt the warmth that reassured him not only of her presence, but of her willingness to remain within reach. For the first time, he sensed her trust, tender yet resilient, rooted not in obligation, but in choice. "He doubted you," he confessed softly. "Not because I questioned your purity,
but because I feared what it meant to need you. I feared that if you vanished, I would crumble. And so I demanded certainty where none could exist. Konohanasakuya-hime shook her head, a motion graceful as drifting petals. Certainty is a mountain's dream, not a blossom's. Yet even mountains erode. Nothing divine or mortal escapes impermanence. She stepped closer until the warmth of their breath mingled. But devotion is not measured by permanence. It is measured by presence, by the willingness to remain, even knowing the bloom may fall. A breeze swept through the clearing, scattering petals around them like fragments of a promise too delicate to hold in one's hands, yet too beautiful to ignore. In this moment, neither spoke, but neither needed to. The world seemed to pause, inhaling the quiet truth that had grown between them, a truth forged not in fire, but through it. He brought her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles, and murmured, "Then allow me to be the one who witnesses every moment of your bloom, not because I claim it or bind it, but because I honor it." Her eyes softened, luminous with a mixture of vulnerability and newfound strength. "And I," she replied, "will allow myself to be witnessed, not as perfection, not as fleeting beauty, but as a heart still learning to open." The fire from the previous night had left a faint mark on the wooden threshold of her sanctuary, a small reminder of how close everything had come to unraveling. She glanced at it, then back at him. The flames did not take me, but they did teach me. I am not meant to be untouched by risk. My beauty is not meant to be preserved behind fear. It is meant to be lived. They walked together beyond the ruined threshold, into the open air where the first blossoms of the season were beginning to unfurl. Each blossom seemed more vivid than before, as if aware that it participated in a cycle both fragile and eternal. Ninigi watched her as she touched the petals lightly, almost reverently, as though greeting sisters born from the same breath of creation. He realized then that loving her meant embracing the fleeting nature of her being, not because she would vanish, but because everything she embodied thrived in cycles. She was not a static deity, but a living essence of renewal, of beauty that blossomed precisely because it would someday fall. She was a lesson in cherishing, in awakening, in letting one's heart expand, even knowing it might break. Konohanasakuya-hime turned to him, her expression contemplative. "You sought permanence," she said, "because permanence feels like safety. But safety without vulnerability is only stagnation. The river that never shifts grows stale. The heart that never risks remains closed." "And now," he asked, "what do you seek?" She stepped closer, her presence warm as sunlight on early spring. "Not guarantees, not promises carved in stone. I seek sincerity. I seek the kind of devotion that acknowledges the brevity of each moment and chooses to cherish it anyway. I seek connection that deepens not despite impermanence, but because of it."
He felt something settle in him, something like acceptance, but warmer, more expansive. "Then I will meet you there," he said, "not as the one who demands your eternity, but as the one who shares your present." A smile touched her lips, delicate yet radiant. "Then this," she said softly, "is our outcome. Not an ending, not a binding, but a gentle unfolding." They stood together beneath the cascading blossoms, the world around them swelling with the quiet pulse of new beginnings. The mountains exhaled warmth, the earth hummed with the promise of renewal, and the morning sunlight cast a tender glow upon the goddess whose very existence was a reminder that beauty was not diminished by its fragility, it was defined by it. And so Konohanasakuya-hime did not offer him permanence. She offered something far more profound, the chance to witness her bloom again and again in every fleeting moment that life would allow.
Dawn had fully settled across the mountains by the time the world grew quiet again. The blossoms that had drifted through the air now rested gently upon the earth, as if laying down their final thoughts for anyone willing to listen. Konohanasakuya-hime stood among them in stillness, letting the morning light soften around her like a veil made not to hide, but to reveal. After the fire, after the fear, after the trembling confession of longing, she understood that what endured was not the absence of fragility, but the grace born from embracing it. The petals at her feet trembled with each breeze, and she watched them with a gaze filled not with sorrow, but with tenderness. Each petal had lived its brief life without resistance, opening fully even though the wind would eventually claim it. There was courage in that surrender, a kind of quiet bravery the world often overlooked. She sensed that her story, like theirs, was meant to be read not as a tragedy of impermanence, but as a hymn to the fleeting beauty of connection. Ninigi no Mikoto watched her from a short distance, his expression contemplative. He had come to learn something essential, something that had eluded him through divine pride and the desire for certainty. Love, he now understood, was not a thing to secure, but a thing to honor. It did not grow heavier with chains of permanence, nor did it need the walls of expectation to survive. Instead, it thrived in openness, in the fearless willingness to show one's heart even when it trembled. He approached her quietly, and she did not turn because she already felt him, like a warmth settling behind her ribs. When he stopped beside her, they both looked out toward the horizon, where early spring light scattered itself upon the slopes. It was a simple moment, unadorned, unclaimed, but it carried the weight of everything they had learned. "Last night," Ninigi murmured, "I feared the petals would fall before I understood how to cherish them." Konohanasakuya-hime lowered her gaze to the fallen blossoms at their feet. She said, "The petals were never meant to cling to the branch forever. They fall so that the tree may bloom again. Their descent is not the end of beauty, but part of its rhythm."
He, however, paused, letting her words settle into him fully. "And love," he asked, "does it follow the same rhythm?"
She breathed in slowly, letting the mountain air carry its coolness through her chest. "Love," she answered, "is a season that repeats only when tended with sincerity. It flourishes not because it is permanent, but because it is renewed with each offering of the heart." The wind stirred again, lifting a handful of blossoms into the air. They drifted around the two deities, their dance ephemeral yet profoundly serene. Ninigi reached out, trying to catch one on his palm, but it slipped past him with the ease of something never meant to be held. Konohanasakuya-hime smiled gently at the gesture. "You cannot hold a petal long," she said, "but you can feel it brush your skin. You cannot command the bloom to last, but you can stand beneath the tree and let its beauty soften you while it lives." Ninigi closed his hand slowly, as if holding on to the sensation rather than the object. "Then the worth lies in the moment itself," he said. She nodded, her expression luminous with quiet understanding. "Moments are small, but they change us. They teach us how to see. They show us what our hearts lean toward. They remind us that even brief beauty is still beauty." Their shared silence that followed was not empty, but full of recognition, full of acceptance, full of something tender that needed no declaration. The fire of the night before, with all its heat and terror, seemed distant now. Yet its lesson had carved itself deeply into both of them. From that trial came a truth, soft as a kiss and firm as bedrock. That fragility is not a flaw, but a teacher. That desire is not shameful, but brave. That love, even in its fleetingness, leaves traces that do not wither. Konohanasakuya-hime placed her hand lightly upon her abdomen, the place where her children would soon grow, children who would inherit the breath of mountains and the pulse of divine lineage. Her expression softened into a mixture of wonder and responsibility. Something new was beginning within her, something that would outlast the blossoms of this season, something that would carry forward the resilience this experience had awakened. Ninigi looked at her, realization dawning gently upon his features. "So this is what comes after the fire," he said quietly. She smiled, not radiant like a goddess, but tender like a woman touched by hope. "After fire," she whispered, "comes life. After fear, clarity. After the fall of petals, the promise of new bloom." The mountains around them seemed to echo this sentiment. The ground, still warm from underground fire, pulsed faintly beneath their feet. The early sun painted gold across the treetops. Even the lingering scent of smoke had softened into the faint sweetness of budding sakura.
Konohanasakuya-hime turned to him fully, her presence gentle and open. "The world teaches us through impermanence," she said. "It shows us that every moment is precious precisely because it will not repeat in the same form. But what we choose to carry from each moment, that is where something eternal is born." He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as the goddess he had been sent to claim, but as the soul who had chosen to stand beside him despite her fragility, despite her fears, despite his own failures. In her, he saw a reflection of everything he longed to become, humble, open-hearted, and courageous in ways deeper than divine power could measure. "You've taught me that love is not a command," he said softly. "It is a willingness. And a gentleness," she added, "a way of holding without grasping." The breeze columned again, settling the world into a stillness that felt almost sacred. Around them, the fallen petals formed a pale pink ring, as if nature itself had drawn a quiet blessing around their shared space. Konohanasakuya-hime closed her eyes briefly, letting the warmth of sunlight touch her face. When she opened them, her gaze held both melancholy and peace, an understanding that beauty did not need eternity to matter. There is a sweetness in things that do not last, a softness in knowing we must savor them while they are here. That is what love asks of us, to taste the moment without demanding that it remain upon the tongue forever. Ninigi felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with a deep, aching gratitude. "Then I will savor every moment you choose to share with me," he said simply. She extended her hand, and he took it without hesitation. Together they walked down the slope, moving slowly as if unwilling to disturb the fragile poetry of the morning. The petals whispered beneath their steps, reminding them both that endings were only transitions, that every fall made space for new beginning. And as they descended toward the valley, leaving behind the sanctuary of blossoms and fire, a soft truth lingered between them like the last petal drifting through the air, that the beauty of life, of love, of longing, of connection, lies not in its permanence, but in the courage to meet each moment fully, knowing it will pass, yet giving one's heart to it anyway.